morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight. It's Thursday morning. It is the second to last day of Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and I've got the truck driver's biggest fan, the one and only Thomas Wasson, our enterprise fleet expert here from FreightWaves with me to talk all things loaded and rolling. Thomas, first off, is there a truck driver that you are appreciating this week, or is it just sharing the love? Are all truck drivers thanked this week?
All truck drivers are my favorite, but shout out to Al Weber. When I first started out at a smaller fleet, at AI Fleet, he was one of my drivers, lived in Pennsylvania, always had the best in terms of dealing with stress. He just was a great guy. And in terms of when things messed up, Al just had such a great outlook that I want to give him a shout out. We need more Al Webers out there. His friend, as well as Bob, I can't remember Bob's last name, but Al and Bob both would be in competition because they lived in the same hometown and they recruited each other. And so, it's folks like that, I think, giving names, telling people about it. That's what makes it all the difference. We'll talk about all this facts and other stuff later, but big shout out to the folks at AI Fleet. Keep it up.
The nice thing is that I think that drivers have been more appreciated in the last kind of 4 years, really, since the pandemic happened. But if you see a truck driver, if you know a truck driver, if you are a truck driver, tell them thank you. Tell them they appreciate them. If you are people who manage truck drivers, make sure that you get them more than just a $5 Starbucks gift card. Maybe advocate for some higher wages. Maybe talk about improving their quality of life. Maybe do things that actually impact their job. The other 364 days of the week, or 359. I can't do math on the fly. 359 days of the week.
Yeah.
Or of the year. Just say thank you.
It's a business work week.
Exactly.
Plus or minus.
Say thank you to your truck drivers. Thomas, let's get into the meat of our FreightWaves Community Spotlight this morning. We've got some new data from ATRI talking about driver detention. And this study, I think, is pretty fascinating because it found that drivers experience detention in about 39.3, about 40% of their total stops. But this was a pretty small survey, right? Talk to us a little bit about the numbers.
So ATRI numbers around 200 to 300, I think upwards of 400 potentially. But the big takeaways was that it got better compared to the last time they did it. So back in like 2013, 2014, the respondents said there was higher likelihood of detention. And then when we fast forward to recently, within the last year, we're looking at the new data set from the survey, and it showed that detention levels across the board, the extent of how screwed you are has improved, but nearly 40% did report encountering detention. This is something that when we want to look at this data set, is it a preload, drop and hook, live load, live unload? Those are things that'll really impact it. One of the most fascinating things I do think about when I look at this data is that the issue of getting paid is still a huge problem. Mm-hmm. When we look at the data, the survey said 75% of carriers invoiced it, which means that I'm asking for it. Please pay me. But out of that, on the aggregate, only like 55% got paid. Only 36% if you're reefer. Talk about reefer madness.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? You want to think, hey, you're wasting time. You absolutely should get paid out of that. And maybe that says a little bit more about your shipper than it does anything, right? A shipper of choice is one who actually pays their carriers detention.
I think we need to add that in for our FreightWaves Shipper of Choice Awards. How often do you pay detention? And I think this goes on to, especially...
I actually do think that that's part of the criteria.
Oh, really?
I genuinely think that that's one of the things that gets judged on is if their carriers are happy with the way that they get paid detention or not.
I think so. And a lot of the carriers, for that very reason, will do these drop trailer situations. But I think tying into the overall Driver Appreciation Week, there's two big pain points with detention. First, do you get paid? So does the carrier get paid? And then secondly, does the driver get a cut? Mm-hmm. Now, this is something not a lot of folks talk about because like when I worked at a US Express and other ones, the company got paid, but the drivers typically got paid their fixed rate per mile, their guaranteed minimums. And so it's a very sticky situation because I do think in a perfect world, if I'm a driver, give me that cut. If I get $50, give me like a little extra $20, but I think that gives into an overall thing is when we're talking about appreciating drivers, a lot of times drivers will complain between point A and point B, but when you're sitting there at point A and point B, those are oftentimes the places that are going to slow you down the most because drivers want to drive.
Absolutely. They want to get on the road and they want to keep those wheels turning because that's where they make their money, of course. If you're sitting, you're not earning that cash. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what else is going on in the trucking space right now. We've got some new data on Class 8 orders coming into the fourth quarter of the year, and it's not super great.
big concerns. Now, when we're looking at Class 8 orders, ACT Research, FTR, Transportation Intelligence are two of the big ones. JD Power also has used Class 8 pricing. The order season, to preface this, during the year, the summer doldrums, the order books open up in September, and then it normally gets to be a feeding frenzy in October. So right now, recent data for August, everyone is kind of thinking, are people placing orders? Because right now, we know for sure that trailer orders aren't looking hot. And so there's a concern that because no one's making any money right now, that Class 8 tractor orders may not look hot. We have 2 months to watch, because if September and October pass and it's lackluster, then we're going to see some warning signs heading into 2025, because fleets are now really pulling back.
Well, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that fleets who had ordered, the OEMs are actually now working, they've pretty much worked through their backlogs entirely. And so all these fleets that had ordered previously that kept those order numbers overly inflated, I think for a little bit, have received their new builds. They've put their older trucks into the used market now. So the used market is now being influxed with these trucks that fleets were holding on to for a longer period of time. The impact of that on your order books for what is the end of 2024 and the start of 2025, I think really can't be understated enough, right?
And it's also, the bigger question as well is that large fleets will typically place bulk orders. They're not really spec'd as much. On the X platform, I saw Tiny Bull Hauler. Shout out to her. She recently got a new Mack truck. She hauls bulls, cattle. And she had mentioned that it took her, I think, since last June or last July when she placed the order. So we're thinking about as well, how long does it take, the backlog to build ratio? And so one of the big questions that we don't know the answer to yet, and we're speculating, ACT had recently put something in. Let me pull up this quote real quick. Kenny Veith, talking about the low, we're in a lull before the surge. September is the month when the factors flip, but right now September is modest. And so October is when it gets underway, and the big thing is while inventories are in a headwind, the path of orders is foundational, backlogs are low, ratios and build ratios are low. It's kind of an interesting thing because Q4 and Q1 are going to have to be the make or break. And we already see situations with Wabash potentially being sued with this trailer stuff from a trailer they made. I mean, it's a very weird scenario because in the macro sense, the market has not performed as we hoped it would. And now we're kind of in this weird spot where it's like we're punting the ball. It's a college term, 3rd and 15. Tennessee's playing OU this coming weekend. We're punting the ball, and hopefully in the fourth quarter, we'll get some better results. But it's a weird time. And as an expert, I want to tell people to be cautioned. Like, we have high frequency data, but let the food digest, because right now we're getting a lot of volatility. We're getting a lot of factors, and it's just a very weird spot to be in right now. I wouldn't call anything. I'd only bet like $5.
There you go. Hey, if you want to really appreciate your truck driver, maybe place an order for them in Q4. All they want for Christmas is a brand new truck.
A brand new truck, a brand new sleeper, or honestly, with drivers lately, a lot of the trends is going to be home times. They want to get a little more pay. They want home time. They want perks like maybe paying for truck stop parking and stuff. So for this driver appreciation week, think outside the box. Don't just offer them the platitudes. Don't offer them the free dinner. Really make it the effort. And I think that if you're doing your job right as a fleet, every week should be driver appreciation week. And, at the end of the day, like some people and commentators on social media, they'll poo-poo the fact that we're doing an appreciation week. But I really honestly believe that if you're a well-run fleet, remember your drivers. Remember the Al Webbers and the Bobs. Thank them for what they do. It's not truck 11259. It's a person behind the wheel. And even though we may have a very high-stress job, at the end of the day, it's very important to remember there's a person, a name, a face behind the wheel, behind the phone, behind the shipping dock. And I think that's something our industry really lacks. It gets real easy when times are tough to point fingers. So that is my driver appreciation spiel.
There you go. Thomas stepping off of his soapbox today. Thomas, thank you for joining us this morning for your community spotlight. Of course, we'll find the Loaded and Rolling newsletter up on FreightWaves.com, and you can find this week's episode of Loaded and Rolling up on the FreightWaves YouTube, or listen to it in your ears wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the above. Thomas, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week on Boomer Sooner.
Go Vols.